The plasma cannon had been aimed at Commander Kale's head for exactly 47 seconds when Baron Vorthak started laughing. "You destroyed my entire fleet, human," Vorthak said, his voice carrying the musical undertones that made his species sound like they were always about to break into song. "Turned my orbital fortresses into scrap metal, made my armies surrender on 17 different worlds." The aliens' laughter grew louder, more musical, more unsettling. "For this, I owe you a reward." Kyle kept his hands steady, his eyes locked on the Baron's 6 pupils that dilated and contracted independently. Around them, the throne room hummed with the soft whispers of courtiers who had just watched their military might crumble under coalition firepower. The war was over. Everyone knew it. But Vorthak was still smiling. "I'm not here for rewards," Kale said. "Just surrender terms." "Oh, but I insist." Vorthak gestured, and 2 guards dragged something forward. Not something. Someone. A young woman, her blue skin pale as winter sky, crimson hair falling like blood across her shoulders. She moved wrong, too loose, too limp, like a marionette with cut strings. "My daughter Ethis. Consider her a gift." The guards dropped her at Kale's feet. She hit the crystalline floor with a sound like breaking glass, but her eyes, brilliant amber eyes, tracked every movement in the room. They were the only part of her that seemed alive. "The Crimson Plague took her 5 years ago," Vorthak continued, his musical voice now carrying notes of pure malice. "Severed every neural pathway below her neck. She can see, hear, think. Oh, how she thinks. But she cannot move, cannot speak, cannot even blink when she chooses to. The perfect companion for a destroyer of worlds." The courtiers erupted in that harmonic laughter again, but Kale was studying the woman's face. There was intelligence there, burning behind those amber eyes. Intelligence and something else. Hope? Desperation? He couldn't tell, but something in her expression made his next words inevitable. "I accept." The laughter died. Vorthak's 6 eyes widened simultaneously. "You? What?" "I accept responsibility for her." Kyle knelt and carefully lifted Ethis from the floor. She was lighter than expected, as if the plague had somehow diminished not just her muscle control, but her very substance. "She's under coalition protection now." "She is broken property," Vorthak shrieked, his musical voice cracking into discordant notes. "She requires feeding tubes, waste management, constant medical supervision. She will die within weeks without specialized care." "Then I'd better learn to give it," Kale said, and walked out of the throne room carrying a woman who couldn't even thank him. 3 days later, aboard the medical frigate Ascendant, Dr. Sarah Chen was explaining why hope was a dangerous thing. "The neural pathways are completely severed," she said, manipulating the holographic brain scan with practiced efficiency. "The plague didn't just damage the connections, it dissolved them, like acid eating through copper wire." She highlighted affected areas in red, and the display looked like a galaxy bleeding to death. "There's no known treatment for this level of damage." Kyle studied the scan, noting how Ethis's eyes tracked the conversation, even though she lay motionless on the medical bed. "But her brain activity is normal?" "More than normal. Hyperactive, actually. The plague victims remain fully conscious throughout the progression. They experience every moment of their paralysis with complete awareness." Dr. Chen's voice carried the weight of someone who had delivered too much bad news. "It's considered one of the cruelest diseases in known space." "Can you understand us?" Kale asked Ethis directly. Her left eye closed once, deliberately. Dr. Chen stepped back. That's not in any of the literature. Plague victims lose all voluntary motor control within the first month. Once for yes, twice for no," Kale continued. 2 deliberate blinks. 3 times for I don't know. 1 blink. "Impossible," Dr. Chen whispered, then immediately began running new scans. Either the disease progression was different in her case, or what? Or she's been conscious and aware for 5 years, with no way to communicate, and she just developed her own method of interaction. Dr. Chen's hands moved rapidly across her instruments. "Do you realize what that implies about her psychological resilience? Over the next week, they established a communication system using eye movements and holographic displays. It was agonizingly slow, but it worked. Ethos could spell out words letter by letter, expressing thoughts that had been trapped inside her head for half a decade. Her first complete message was, "The plague was not natural." Her second was, "My father created it." Her third was, "I know where he hid the research." Dr. Chen sat down heavily. Biological warfare. He was experimenting on his own people. "More than that," Kale said, reading the next message as Ethos laboriously spelled it out. "She says there are others. Hidden facilities. Thousands of plague victims kept alive for research purposes. That's," Dr. Chen started, then stopped. "That's a crime against sentient beings on a scale that would justify coalition intervention." "Where?" Kyle asked Ethos. Her response came slowly. "Station Mindforge. Forbidden Sector. Coordinates in my memory." The Forbidden Sector got its name for good reason. Gravitational anomalies that could tear ships apart. Radiation storms that fried electronics. Automated defense systems left over from wars fought before humans had discovered fire. It was where the galaxy's various civilizations dumped their most dangerous experiments and hoped they'd stay buried. "It's suicide," Dr. Chen said as she reviewed their options. "Even if we make it to the station, there's no guarantee the research will be intact, or that it will help. But there's a chance? A chance, yes. But the risks? I'll go alone," Kyle decided. No point in risking more lives than necessary. Ethos's eye movements became frantic. "No, need doctor, need me. I know the station layout." "You're paralyzed," Kale pointed out gently. "I remember everything, every corridor, every lab, every security protocol. Father used to take me there before the plague." Her next message came faster, as if urgency could overcome the physical limitations of their communication method. "Others there now, still alive, still waiting." Dr. Chen looked at the navigation data they'd extracted from Ethos's memories. "It would take 2 weeks to reach the Forbidden Sector. 2 weeks of constant danger, flying through space that's actively trying to kill us. And if we succeed? If we succeed, we might find research that could help not just Ethos, but thousands of other plague victims across the galaxy. Then we go." The journey to Station Mindforge was everything they'd feared and worse. They lost main propulsion twice, forcing Dr. Chen to crawl through access tubes in a radiation suit while gravitational shears tried to pull the ship apart. The navigation computer failed during their third day out, leaving them dependent on Ethos's memories and dead reckoning through a region of space that changed its rules without warning. But the worst part was watching Ethos's frustration grow day by day. Here was someone with detailed knowledge of their destination, intimate understanding of the dangers they faced, strategic insights that could save their lives, and her only means of communication was blinking at letters on a screen. "This is taking too long," Dr. Chen muttered on day 8 as Ethos slowly spelled out a warning about automated defense drones. "By the time she finishes explaining the threat, we might already be dead." "Working on it," Kale said. He'd been studying the ship's communication systems, looking for ways to speed up their interactions. "What if we bypass the visual interface entirely? Direct neural connection?" "Impossible with her level of nerve damage. Any interface would need functional motor pathways to translate thoughts into signals." But Ethos was blinking rapidly. "Not motor pathways. Sensory pathways still intact. Could receive signals directly." Dr. Chen frowned. "You're talking about experimental technology, brain-computer interfaces that haven't been tested on plague victims. The risk of further neural damage is acceptable," Ethos finished through her blinking code. "The equipment modifications alone would take days." "Do it," Cal ordered. "We need every advantage we can get." Station Mindforge hung in the gravitational shadow of a neutron star, its hull scarred by cosmic radiation, but structurally intact. As they approached, automated systems began powering up, ancient weapons tracking their ship with mechanical precision. "Defense grid is activating," Dr. Chen reported. "Multiple targeting locks. They're charging weapons." Ethos, now connected to the ship's systems through a hastily rigged neural interface, spoke for the first time in 5 years. Her voice came through the speakers, synthesized but unmistakably hers. "Broadcasting override codes now. Authorization Vorthax 77 Alpha." The weapons powered down. Docking clamps extended from the station's central hub. How long since anyone's been here? Kyle asked as they suited up for boarding. Station logs show 3 years since last personnel transfer, Ethos replied through the speakers. Automated systems have been maintaining life support and research operations. The corridors of Mindforge were a study in sterile horror. Laboratories lined both sides of the main passage, their transparent walls revealing equipment that no ethical medical review board would have approved. In some rooms, they could see empty medical beds with restraint systems designed more for containment than comfort. But it was the occupied labs that made their breath catch. Dear God, Dr. Chen whispered. Dozens of medical pods lined the walls, each containing a plague victim in various stages of the disease. Some retained partial movement, others were completely paralyzed like Ethos had been. All were conscious, their eyes tracking the newcomers with expressions of desperate hope. They've been here for years, Ethos said, her synthesized voice heavy with emotion. Test subjects for experimental treatments that Vorthak never intended to use for actual healing. How many? This is just one lab. There are 17 more on this level alone. Kyle felt something cold and sharp settle in his chest. Hundreds of people trapped in their own bodies, kept alive for medical experimentation, while the galaxy believed them dead. It was beyond cruel. It was an atrocity that demanded justice. But first, they needed to find the research data. The central laboratory was a testament to advanced medical technology pushed to its limits. Quantum computers modeled biological systems at the molecular level, while genetic sequencers worked around the clock to map the plague's effects. Banks of data storage devices hummed quietly, containing terabytes of research accumulated over 5 years of continuous experimentation. This is it, Dr. Chen breathed, interfacing with the laboratory systems. Everything Vorthak learned about the plague, every treatment attempt, every failure and partial success. Any actual cures? Kale asked. Not cures, but Dr. Chen's hands moved rapidly across the holographic displays. Neural bridge technology, nanotechnology that can bypass damaged pathways and create artificial connections between the brain and nervous system. Does it work? According to these test results, yes. Limited trials on laboratory animals showed complete restoration of motor function, but they never tested it on actual plague victims because Vorthak was more interested in understanding the disease than curing it. Ethos's voice came through the speakers with quiet intensity. Test it on me. The risks are enormous, Dr. Chen warned. This is completely experimental technology. One mistake could cause brain damage, death, or conditions worse than the plague itself. I've been trapped in my own body for 5 years, Ethos replied. Death would be preferable to staying like this forever. And if it works, then we can help the others. The neural bridge procedure took 18 hours. Dr. Chen worked with the precision of a surgeon and the creativity of an engineer, introducing millions of nanoscale machines into Ethos's bloodstream while monitoring their progress through quantum resolution scanners. Nanobots are reaching target locations, she reported as tiny machines spread throughout Ethos's nervous system, beginning bridge construction between brain tissue and spinal cord pathways. For the first 12 hours, nothing visible happened. Ethos lay motionless while microscopic robots built connections that biological evolution had never imagined. But then slowly, her fingers began to twitch. Voluntary movement in the hands, Dr. Chen announced, unable to keep the excitement from her voice. Neural bridges are successfully carrying motor signals. By hour 15, Ethos could flex her arms. By hour 17, she was sitting up under her own power. When the procedure finally ended, she stood and walked across the laboratory on legs that hadn't moved in 5 years. How do you feel? Kale asked. Ethos smiled, the first genuine smile he'd seen from her. Like I've been reborn. But their success was interrupted by proximity alarms echoing throughout the station. Ships approaching, Cal reported from the command center. 6 vessels, military configuration, broadcasting no identification codes. Shadow Guard, Ethos said, her expression hardening. My father's personal assassination unit. They must have been monitoring the station for activity. How long until they arrive? 15 minutes, maybe less. Can we defend the station? Not against Shadow Guard. They're enhanced soldiers with military-grade equipment. Ethos moved to the laboratory's control systems with the fluid grace of someone relearning the joy of physical movement. But they don't know I've been cured. They expect to find a helpless invalid. What's the plan? We free the other plague victims first. Give them the same treatment I received. Ethos's hands flew over the controls, activating automated medical systems throughout the station. If we're going to fight, we might as well fight with an army. The next 6 hours were a frantic race against time. Automated systems began administering neural bridge treatments to every plague victim in the facility, while Dr. Chen monitored the procedures remotely. Not all of them worked. Some patients had been paralyzed too long, others had complications that made the nanobots ineffective. But enough succeeded to make a difference. When the Shadow Guard finally breached the station's defenses, they found something they hadn't expected. Dozens of former plague victims moving with the enhanced coordination that neural bridge technology provided. These weren't just cured patients. They were people whose capabilities had been augmented beyond normal biological limits. The battle that followed was swift and decisive. Enhanced by nanobots that could process sensory information at superhuman speeds, the former plague victims moved like a coordinated unit. They knew every corridor of the station, every hiding place, every tactical advantage. More importantly, they were fighting for their freedom after years of imprisonment. Impossible, the Shadow Guard leader gasped as he was overwhelmed by people he had expected to find helpless and paralyzed. The plague victims are dead. The reports confirmed it. The reports lied, Ethos said, standing over him with the quiet dignity of someone who had overcome the impossible. Just like everything else my father told you. With the Shadow Guard defeated, they faced a new problem. What to do with hundreds of newly liberated plague victims who had nowhere to go? They can't return to their old lives, Dr. Chen pointed out. Officially, they've been dead for years. Families have moved on. Possessions have been redistributed. Legal identities have been erased. Then we give them new lives, Kale said. New identities, new purpose. Doing what? Ethos smiled. Hunting down the rest of my father's hidden facilities. Finding other plague victims who are still trapped. Bringing neural bridge technology to every corner of the galaxy where it's needed. The liberation of Station Mindforge sent shockwaves across known space. The revelation that Baron Vorthak had been conducting illegal medical experiments on his own people triggered investigations that brought down his entire government. Coalition forces moved quickly to locate and liberate other hidden facilities, finding thousands more plague victims who had been written off as dead. But the real revolution was in the technology itself. Neural bridge nanobots proved to be useful for far more than just plague treatment. Spinal cord injuries that had paralyzed accident victims for years could be bypassed with artificial nerve pathways. Brain damage from strokes or trauma could be routed around using alternative neural connections. Even genetic conditions that affected motor function could be compensated for with the right nanotechnology. We're not just treating a disease anymore, Dr. Chen observed as she reviewed applications from medical facilities across the galaxy. We're fundamentally changing how medicine approaches neural damage. The ship they built for their new mission was unlike anything in the Coalition fleet. Second Chances was designed specifically for medical operations in dangerous territory, equipped with manufacturing facilities that could produce neural bridge nanobots on site. Its crew consisted entirely of former plague victims whose enhanced capabilities made them ideally suited for rescue operations. Their first major mission took them to the prison colonies of the Arcturus system, where political dissidents were being held in conditions designed to break their spirits. Many had been there so long they'd given up hope of ever seeing freedom again. We're here to offer you a choice, Ethos announced as they entered the main detention facility. Stay here and accept the limitations others have placed on you, or come with us and discover what you're really capable of. The response was overwhelming, not just from the political prisoners, but from the guards who had been ordered to keep them confined. Many of the facility's staff were just as trapped as the inmates, forced into roles they hated by economic necessity or family pressure. You're offering us enhancement? One guard asked skeptically. Military augmentation to make us better soldiers? We're offering you the chance to become whatever you choose to become, Ethos replied. Enhanced capabilities aren't about making you a better weapon. They're about removing the barriers that prevent you from reaching your full potential. Their second mission brought them to the factory worlds of the Sigma Draconis system, where workers with disabilities were being exploited in dangerous industrial operations. The corporations running these facilities claimed they were providing employment opportunities for people who couldn't find work elsewhere. "We know we're not normal," said Marcus Webb, a human whose brain damage from an industrial accident had left him with severe motor control problems. "The company keeps us because we work for lower wages." "Normal is overrated," Ethos told him, as Dr. Chen prepared the neural bridge procedure. "What matters is what you can accomplish when the limitations are removed." The transformation was dramatic. Workers who had struggled with basic motor functions found themselves capable of precision tasks that exceeded normal human abilities. More importantly, they discovered they had choices. They could stay and demand better working conditions, or leave and find employment that respected their enhanced capabilities. Word of their work spread faster than official communication channels could track. Independent news networks began following their missions, broadcasting stories of transformation and liberation that inspired similar movements across the galaxy. Medical schools started teaching neural bridge techniques. Corporate policies were rewritten to accommodate enhanced workers. Most significantly, the very definition of disability began to change. "We're not just helping individuals anymore," Cal observed as they reviewed reports from dozens of worlds where neural bridge technology was being implemented. "We're changing how entire civilizations think about human potential." The resistance came from predictable sources: medical corporations that profited from long-term treatment of incurable conditions filed lawsuits claiming that neural bridge technology was unsafe and untested. Military organizations argued that civilian access to enhancement technology posed national security risks. Conservative political movements declared that artificial augmentation was unnatural and morally wrong. But the technology was too revolutionary to suppress, and the results too dramatic to ignore. Every successful treatment created new advocates who shared their experiences with others. Every liberation mission generated footage that contradicted official claims about the dangers of enhancement. "They're calling us terrorists now," Dr. Chen reported after monitoring news broadcasts from several major worlds, "accused of destabilizing established medical protocols and undermining social order." "Good," Ethos replied with satisfaction. "Revolution is never comfortable for those who benefit from the status quo." The real test came when Baron Vorthak escaped from prison. The news reached them through encrypted channels. Maximum security breach. Multiple casualties among the guard force. No trace of how the escape was accomplished. Intelligence reports suggested inside assistance and significant financial backing. "He's not just escaping," Ethos said as she analyzed the tactical situation. "He's gathering allies for a counter-revolution, conservative factions who see neural bridge technology as a threat to existing power structures." "What's his objective?" "Prove that enhancement leads to chaos and destruction. Show the galaxy that people like me are dangerous aberrations who need to be controlled or eliminated." The confrontation came sooner than expected. Vorthak's forces attacked the Neural Bridge Treatment Center on New Geneva, taking hundreds of patients and staff members hostage. The ransom demand was simple: Ethos in exchange for the lives of everyone in the facility. "It's obviously a trap," Dr. Chen said as they reviewed tactical options from orbit. "He knows you'll come for them, and he's prepared for your enhanced capabilities." "Of course it's a trap, but what choice do I have?" "We go in together. Full military assault, overwhelming force." "No." Ethos checked her equipment, not weapons but medical scanners and neural interface devices that could coordinate with the nanobots in her bloodstream. "This is about more than just a rescue mission. It's about proving that enhancement doesn't make us monsters." The facility where Vorthak waited was a fortress of his own design, its architecture optimized for defensive operations. As Ethos approached, she could feel automated systems scanning her, trying to identify her enhanced capabilities and develop countermeasures. Inside, she found her father waiting in what had once been the main treatment center. He stood surrounded by hostages, his form now augmented with biotechnology that pushed his species' capabilities beyond their natural limits. The years since his escape had not been idle. He had enhanced himself specifically to counter the advantages that neural bridge technology provided. "Daughter," he said, his musical voice now carrying harmonic frequencies that tried to disrupt artificial neural pathways, "you have caused considerable inconvenience." "Father," "Still trying to control people through fear, I see." Control is the natural order. Some beings are meant to lead, others to follow. Your technology disrupts that balance, creates false equality where none should exist. The only thing false here is your belief that worth is determined by biological inheritance. The fight that followed was philosophical as much as physical. Every move represented competing visions of what sentient beings could become. Vorthak fought to preserve traditional hierarchies where enhancement was a privilege of the elite. Ethos fought for the principle that everyone deserved the chance to transcend their limitations. But the hostages ultimately decided the outcome. As the battle raged around them, they began working together to free themselves from their restraints. Patients with enhanced neural pathways coordinated their efforts with precision that seemed telepathic. Staff members used their medical knowledge to disable security systems and open escape routes. You see, Ethos said as humans and aliens worked together with capabilities that transcended their original biological limitations. Enhancement doesn't create masters and slaves. It creates cooperation. Vorthak stared at the scene unfolding around him, his worldview crumbling in the face of evidence he couldn't deny. Enhanced beings were choosing to help each other rather than establishing dominance. Artificial capabilities were being used to create rather than destroy. This cannot be correct, he whispered. Power must create hierarchy. It is the natural order. It's one possibility, Ethos replied gently, but not the only one, and certainly not the best one. The broadcast of the hostage crisis reached every corner of known space within hours. News networks had captured everything. The battle between father and daughter, the spontaneous cooperation of the hostages, the moment when Vorthak's philosophy crumbled under the weight of evidence. But it was what happened next that truly changed history. "Attention, Galaxy," Ethos said, standing in the ruins of her father's stronghold while emergency crews helped the freed hostages. "My name is Ethos, and 5 years ago I was given away as a broken thing, a cruel joke, a burden nobody wanted. Today I stand here not as my father's daughter, but as proof that no one deserves to be thrown away." The camera feeds showed her clearly, standing tall, moving with fluid grace, speaking with the confidence of someone who had overcome the impossible. Behind her, former hostages were helping each other to safety, their enhanced capabilities allowing them to accomplish tasks that would have been impossible for unaugmented beings. "Neural bridge technology isn't just about treating disease," she continued. "It's about recognizing that every consciousness has unlimited potential. Every being who has been told they are broken, worthless, or beyond help deserves to know that transformation is possible." The response was immediate and overwhelming. Medical facilities across the galaxy reported massive increases in treatment requests. Governments that had restricted neural bridge technology found themselves facing public pressure to reconsider their policies. Most significantly, the broadcast had reached isolated communities and forgotten populations who had never known that help was available. "Signal from the outer rim," Dr. Chen reported as they monitored the communication networks. "A mining colony that's been cut off from medical support for decades. They have over 300 workers with various forms of neural damage from industrial accidents." "Plot a course," Ethos ordered. "Time to expand our reach." The mining colony of Kepler's Edge existed on the boundary between map space and the unknown. Its inhabitants were predominantly humans and near-human species who had come seeking opportunity in the asteroid belts, but found only exploitation and danger. Industrial accidents were common, safety protocols minimal, and medical care virtually non-existent. "We've been sending distress calls for years," said Colony Administrator Elena Vasquez, as second chances docked with their central habitat. "Corporate headquarters keeps promising to send medical supplies, but they never arrive. We've had people paralyzed, brain damaged, or worse from mining accidents, and all we can do is make them comfortable while they wait to die." "Show us," Ethos said simply. The medical wing of the colony was a heartbreaking testament to industrial neglect. Dozens of workers lay in makeshift hospital beds, their injuries ranging from spinal cord damage to traumatic brain injuries. All had been told that their conditions were permanent, that they should be grateful for basic life support. "This man is Jonas," Elena said, gesturing to a middle-aged human whose eyes tracked their movement, but whose body remained completely still. "Caught in a cave-in 6 months ago. Crushed vertebrae. The company doctor said he'd never walk again, but we can't even afford to send him to a proper medical facility. Ethis knelt beside Jonas's bed, studying his face. Like her own years of paralysis, she could see the intelligence burning behind eyes that had become the only window to a trapped consciousness. "Can you understand me?" she asked. Jonas blinked once. Once for yes, twice for no. 2 blinks. 3 times for I don't know? 1 blink. "We're going to help you," Ethis said, her voice carrying the certainty of someone who had made the impossible routine. "All of you." The next 72 hours transformed Kepler's Edge from a place of despair into a testament to the power of determination and advanced technology. Dr. Chen worked around the clock, administering neural bridge treatments to every patient who could benefit from them. The colony's own medical staff assisted, learning the procedures so they could continue helping others after second chances departed. "I can feel my legs," Jonas whispered as the nanobots completed their work. It was the first time he had spoken in 6 months. "They're actually responding to my thoughts." But the real revelation came when the enhanced miners returned to work. Their neural bridges didn't just restore normal function, they provided capabilities that exceeded baseline human parameters. Reaction times that could avoid dangerous situations before they developed. Coordination that allowed for precision work in hazardous environments. Sensory enhancements that could detect structural weaknesses or gas leaks before they became critical. Productivity has increased by 300%, Elena reported a week after the treatments began. But more importantly, we haven't had a single serious accident. The enhanced workers can sense and avoid dangers that would have injured or killed them before. Word of Kepler's Edge spread throughout the Outer Rim communities. Isolated colonies, frontier settlements, and mining operations that had been ignored by the major corporations suddenly found themselves connected to a network of mutual support. Enhanced workers shared their knowledge across vast distances, coordinating efforts and resources in ways that had never been possible. "We're not just treating individuals anymore," Kyle observed as they reviewed reports from dozens of Outer Rim operations. "We're creating a civilization where enhancement is the norm rather than the exception." The implications were staggering. Enhanced communities were more productive, safer, and more collaborative than their unaugmented counterparts. They developed new technologies faster, solved problems more efficiently, and created social structures based on cooperation rather than competition. But success brought new challenges. The mega corporations that profited from exploiting frontier workers were not pleased to see their labor force becoming independent and empowered. Military organizations worried about the strategic implications of entire populations with enhanced capabilities. Most ominously, several governments began discussing the need for enhancement regulation to maintain social stability. "They're scared," Ethis said as she reviewed intelligence reports about proposed legislation. "Enhanced populations are harder to control, harder to exploit. They ask uncomfortable questions and demand better treatment." What's our response? We accelerate the timeline, get neural bridge technology to as many people as possible before they can stop us. The operation they codenamed Cascade was the most ambitious medical intervention in galactic history. Teams from Second Chances spread across known space, targeting populations that were isolated, oppressed, or forgotten by mainstream civilization. Each successful treatment created new advocates who helped spread the technology further. On the prison world of Tartarus III, they enhanced political dissidents who had been sentenced to life imprisonment for opposing authoritarian regimes. The enhanced prisoners didn't attempt to escape. Instead, they began organizing educational programs that challenged the very foundations of the systems that had condemned them. On the war-torn planet of Sigma Reticuli, they treated refugees whose injuries had left them unable to work or care for themselves. Enhanced refugees became community leaders, organizing relief efforts and reconstruction projects that exceeded anything government aid programs had achieved. On the corporate agri-worlds of the Vega system, they secretly enhanced indentured workers whose contracts had trapped them in cycles of perpetual debt. Enhanced workers began coordinating across multiple facilities, sharing information about their rights and organizing collective action that corporations couldn't ignore. Each success generated more requests for help. Medical emergencies that had previously been considered hopeless became routine treatments. Populations that had been written off as permanently disabled discovered they could not only recover, but exceed their original capabilities. Cascade is working beyond our most optimistic projections, Dr. Chen reported after 6 months of operations. We've performed over 10,000 neural bridge procedures across 47 star systems. The technology is spreading exponentially as enhanced populations teach others. But their success had not gone unnoticed by those who preferred the status quo. Emergency transmission from Coalition Command, Cal announced as they prepared to depart for their next mission. We're being recalled for immediate debriefing. The message was brief and official. Report to Starbase Aurora within 72 hours for regulatory compliance review. Failure to comply will result in classification as a rogue medical operation. It's not a debriefing, Ethos said after analyzing the communication. It's an arrest warrant. They want to shut us down before we can spread neural bridge technology any further. We could run, Dr. Chen suggested. Stay in the outer rim, continue operating beyond their jurisdiction. And abandon everyone who needs our help in coalition space? No. Ethos stood, her enhanced reflexes allowing her to project an aura of calm confidence that had become her trademark. If they want a confrontation, we'll give them one, but it will be on our terms. Starbase Aurora was one of the Coalition's primary medical research facilities, home to the most advanced laboratories and the most conservative medical establishment in known space. As second chances approached the massive station, they could see other ships already docked. Representatives from medical corporations, government officials, and military observers who had come to witness what many expected to be the end of the neural bridge revolution. This is Admiral Harrison, came the communication as they requested docking clearance. Dr. Chen, Commander Kale, and Ethos. You're to report directly to Conference Room 7 upon arrival. No delays, no side trips. The conference room was packed with officials who had been waiting to confront the rogue medical team that had been disrupting established protocols across the galaxy. Medical board representatives sat alongside corporate executives and military intelligence officers, all united in their determination to contain what they saw as a dangerous precedent. This hearing will determine whether neural bridge technology represents a legitimate medical advancement or a threat to galactic stability, announced Board Chairman Dr. Marcus Kellerman. We have reports of unauthorized medical procedures, violation of established safety protocols, and deliberate circumvention of regulatory oversight. We have reports of lives saved and people healed, Ethos replied calmly. Thousands of individuals who were told they would never walk, never work, never contribute to society, who are now living productive lives. Lives that have been artificially enhanced beyond normal parameters, Dr. Kellerman continued, creating populations with capabilities that exceed baseline specifications. The social implications alone are exactly what you'd expect when you give people the chance to reach their full potential, Ethos interrupted. Enhanced populations are more productive, more collaborative, more innovative. They solve problems instead of creating them. They also pose security risks, interjected General Patricia Stone from Coalition Intelligence. Enhanced individuals with advanced reaction times, improved sensory capabilities, and networked communication abilities represent an intelligence threat. How do we monitor populations that can outthink our surveillance systems? The same way you monitor any free population, by respecting their rights and earning their cooperation, rather than trying to control them through fear. The hearing continued for hours as officials presented evidence of regulatory violations and unauthorized medical experimentation. But it was the testimony of the enhanced individuals themselves that ultimately changed the tone of the proceedings. Marcus Webb from the Sigma Draconis factories stood before the board with the quiet dignity of someone who had overcome impossible obstacles. Before neural bridge treatment, I was considered a liability, he said. Brain damage from an industrial accident made me unemployable, except for the most dangerous, lowest-paying work. Now I supervise safety protocols that have reduced accident rates by 95%. I contribute instead of consuming. Jonas from Kepler's Edge appeared via holographic link, standing in the mining colony's command center, surrounded by displays showing productivity and safety statistics that exceeded anything the corporate managers had achieved. Enhancement didn't make me superhuman, he said. It made me human again. It gave me back the right to choose my own future. One after another, enhanced individuals testified about their experiences. Former plague victims who had become medical researchers, paralyzed workers who had returned to productive employment, political prisoners who had become community leaders. Each story was a testament to the transformative power of technology applied with compassion rather than control. But it was the children who truly silenced the critics. Zara Void Whisper had been 12 when Ethos first met her at the quantum processing facility. Now 15 and serving as Second Chance's communications specialist, she stood before the board with the confidence of someone who had never been told her neurodivergent brain was a limitation rather than a gift. "You're debating whether enhancement is safe," she said, her voice carrying the clarity that came from having never been taught to doubt her own worth. "But what about the safety of leaving people trapped in limitations that can be overcome? What about the safety of telling children they're broken when they could be extraordinary?" The silence that followed was profound. Here was a young woman whose autism had been seen as a disability until neural bridge technology revealed it as a form of cognitive enhancement that allowed her to process information in ways that exceeded normal human capabilities. "The question," Ethos said as she stood to address the board one final time, "isn't whether we should regulate neural bridge technology. It's whether we have the right to deny it to anyone who could benefit. Every day we delay is another day someone spends believing they're broken beyond repair." The vote was closer than anyone had expected. Medical corporations pushed for strict regulation that would limit access to approved facilities. Military representatives argued for classification as restricted technology, but the testimony of enhanced individuals had created doubt where there had been certainty. In the end, it was Admiral Harrison who cast the deciding vote. "I've spent 30 years in military service," he said as the board prepared to make their decision. "I've seen what happens when enhancement technology is restricted to the elite. It creates inequality, resentment, and ultimately conflict. But I've also seen what happens when it's made available to everyone who needs it. It creates opportunity." The final ruling established neural bridge technology as a recognized medical treatment with the right to be administered by qualified practitioners anywhere in coalition space. More importantly, it established the principle that enhancement was a medical right rather than a privilege, available to anyone who could benefit regardless of their economic status or political position. "We won," Dr. Chen said as they prepared to leave Starbase Aurora. "Neural bridge technology is officially recognized as legitimate medicine." "We won the first battle," Ethos corrected, "but the war for acceptance is far from over. There are still populations that need our help, still governments that want to control access to enhancement, still corporations that profit from keeping people limited." As Second Chances departed for their next mission, a request from the Magellanic Clouds where an entire species was struggling with a genetic condition that affected their nervous systems. Ethos reflected on the journey that had brought her here. 10 years ago, she had been dropped at a conqueror's feet like a broken toy, a cruel joke meant to humiliate both the giver and receiver. Today, she stood at the center of a galactic movement that had fundamentally changed how civilizations thought about limitation and potential. The transformation hadn't just been physical. Through helping others overcome their own barriers, she had discovered that her true strength lay not in the nanobots that had restored her mobility, but in the determination to ensure that no one else would have to suffer as she had suffered. "Signal from the outer rim," Zara reported as they jumped to hyperspace. "Another mining colony requesting assistance. They have reports of a new type of industrial injury that's affecting workers' neural pathways." "Course change approved," Ethos replied without hesitation. "Someone needs help, and that's what we do." The galaxy was vast, and there would always be more barriers to overcome, more limitations to transcend, more proof that the impossible was simply another word for not yet attempted. And somewhere in the cosmic dark, a woman who had once been considered worthless was helping others discover that they were the authors of their own magnificent stories. The legend continued to grow with each life they touched, each barrier they overcame, each moment when someone discovered they were stronger than they had ever imagined. From the depths of paralysis had come not just healing, but revolution. From a cruel joke had emerged hope for an entire galaxy. And in the end, that was the greatest transformation of all. Not the nanobots that had restored her body, but the realization that every being carried within them the power to transcend any limitation, overcome any obstacle, and become something greater than anyone had ever believed possible. 20 years later, as the second chances prepared for what would be Ethos's final mission, she stood in the observation deck watching the swirling colors of the Aurora Nebula. They were heading to a newly discovered species, the Vorthani, ironically sharing her father's name, whose entire civilization faced extinction from a neurological plague similar to the one that had once trapped her. Ironic, isn't it? Kyle said, joining her at the viewport. His hair was gray now, lines marking a face that had seen more transformation than any human in history. We started with one paralyzed woman, and now we're about to save an entire species. Ethos smiled, her reflection in the transparent aluminum, showing someone who had become legend-made flesh. The nanobots in her system had evolved over the decades, making her capabilities almost godlike, but it was her humanity that had made her immortal in the galaxy's memory. My father thought he was giving away broken property, she said softly. Instead, he gave the galaxy proof that there's no such thing as worthless. Every consciousness matters. Every being has potential. Every limitation is just another problem waiting for a solution. The Vorthani homeworld appeared before them like a dying ember in space. Once vibrant cities now lay dark and silent. The plague had struck without warning, leaving 90% of the population paralyzed within weeks. Unlike the Crimson Plague that had targeted individuals, this neurological weapon had been designed to cripple entire civilizations. Incoming transmission, Zara announced, her voice tight with concern. It's from Baron Vorthak. The holographic display flickered to life, revealing Ethos's father, but not as she remembered him. His form was twisted, augmented with technology that seemed more machine than biological. His 6 eyes burned with artificial fire, and when he spoke, his voice carried the harmonics of madness. "My dear daughter," he said, his musical tones now discordant and wrong. "Did you think I would allow you to spread your contamination to yet another world? The Vorthani plague was my final masterpiece, a weapon that cannot be cured by your primitive nanobots. You're supposed to be dead," Kyle said, his hand moving instinctively toward his weapon. "Death is for those who accept limitations," Vorthak replied. "I have transcended such weaknesses. The Vorthani will serve as proof that enhancement leads only to corruption and chaos. When they die, the galaxy will finally understand that some beings are meant to remain broken." The transmission cut off, but proximity alarms immediately began shrieking. 3 massive ships decloaked around the second chances. Vessels of unknown design that radiated the same twisted energy signature as Vorthak's transformed body. "He's not just alive," Dr. Chen said, studying the scanner readings. "He's become something else entirely. Those ships, they're powered by enslaved consciousness. He's using the minds of his own followers as biological computers." Ethos felt something she hadn't experienced in decades. Fear, not for herself, but for the millions of paralyzed beings on the planet below who were counting on her to save them. Her father had spent 20 years preparing for this moment, creating a trap that would destroy everything she had built. "Can we fight them?" Kyle asked. "Not conventionally. Those ships exist partially outside normal space-time. Our weapons won't be effective." Ethos moved to the command center, her enhanced consciousness already calculating possibilities at superhuman speeds. But there might be another way. She began interfacing directly with the ship's systems, her neural bridges connecting not just to the second chances, but to the entire network of enhanced individuals across the galaxy. For the first time in 2 decades, she reached out through the quantum connections that linked every person who had received neural bridge technology. Across known space, enhanced beings felt her call. Former plague victims, liberated workers, transformed refugees, all of them connected through the nanobots that had given them new life. They were no longer just individuals. They were part of something larger, a collective consciousness that spanned star systems. "What are you doing?" Dr. Chen asked as Ethos's body began to glow with internal energy. "Something my father never understood," Ethos replied, her voice now carrying harmonics that spoke directly to the quantum level of reality. "Enhancement isn't about individual power, it's about connection, unity, the strength that comes from beings choosing to help each other rather than dominating them. The battle that followed was unlike anything in recorded history. Vorthak's ships attacked with weapons that bent space-time itself, trying to tear the second chances apart at the molecular level. But Ethos fought back with something more powerful than technology: the combined will of every enhanced consciousness in the galaxy. Through her neural bridges, she channeled the determination of millions, the hope of former prisoners, the courage of paralyzed workers who had learned to walk again, the dreams of children who had been told they were broken but discovered they were extraordinary. All of it flowed through her, transforming her from a single individual into the living embodiment of galactic transformation. "Impossible!" Vorthak screamed as his weapons failed to penetrate the quantum field surrounding the second chances. "You are one being. I have the power of enslaved millions." "You have slaves," Ethos replied, her consciousness now operating on levels that transcended physical reality. "I have friends." She reached out through space itself, touching the enslaved minds that powered her father's ships. Where he had used force and domination, she offered choice and freedom. One by one, the imprisoned consciousness began to break free from their technological cages, choosing liberation over servitude. The ships began to fall apart as their biological computer systems chose to shut down rather than continue serving a master who saw them as property. Vorthak's final scream of rage echoed across multiple dimensions as his twisted form was pulled into the quantum void he had tried to manipulate. "It's over," Kyle said, as the last of the hostile ships disappeared into collapsing space-time. "No," Ethos replied, her attention already turning to the planet below. "It's just beginning." The cure for the Vorthani plague took 3 days to develop and 3 weeks to deploy across their homeworld. But unlike previous missions, this one was different. The nanobots they introduced didn't just restore neural function. They created something unprecedented, a species-wide network of consciousness that allowed the Vorthani to share thoughts, emotions, and experiences directly. "We didn't just cure them," Dr. Chen observed as they watched the first Vorthani cities come back to life. "We gave them a gift that surpasses anything we've achieved before." Standing in the medical bay, watching recovered Vorthani patients take their first steps in months, Ethos felt the profound satisfaction that came from work completed. She had started as a cruel joke, a broken thing cast aside by someone who couldn't see her worth. Now she stood as proof that every being carried within them the seeds of transformation. "What happens now?" Zara asked. "Where do we go next?" Ethos looked out at the stars, seeing not distant lights but possibilities yet to be explored. "Everywhere," she said simply. "The galaxy is vast, consciousness is infinite, and there will always be someone who needs to discover they're stronger than they think." As the second chances prepared for departure, a small Vorthani child approached Ethos with the unsteady steps of someone still learning to trust their newly restored body. "Thank you," the child said in halting standard, "for showing us we weren't broken." "You were never broken," Ethos replied, kneeling to meet the child's eyes. "You were just waiting for someone to hand you the key." And with that truth echoing in the hearts of billions across the galaxy, they sailed on toward the next star, the next world, the next being who needed to learn that no cage was permanent, no limitation absolute, and no consciousness without infinite worth.